This program is brought to you in association with First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?
The world is going through an unparalleled health shock as COVID-19 continues to sweep through millions of lives and a year later still threatens the stability of the global economy. Last year, global economic growth contracted by 4.9% as a result of the unforeseen consequences of the pandemic. Needless to say, many economic activities suffered at the hands of this merciless disease. Mining took a devastating knock, while tourism and hospitality were halted altogether. At the outset of the pandemic and the subsequent economic fallout, the response of the stock market, however, had been somehow puzzling. Take, for example, the Standard & Poor's 500 index, which took a historic plunge to lose 1/3 of its value between 20 February and 23 March 2020. On June 8, 2020, when the World Health Organization announced that the pandemic was worsening around the world, the US stock market began its fourth consecutive week of rally, with Standard & Poor's 500 being back where it was at the beginning of the year as if nothing was happening. Well, that has been the case in the United States of America. So what has been the response to the pandemic of our own exchange here in Botswana? The Botswana Stock Exchange was established in 1989 and has to date listed 30-odd companies from both here in Botswana and across our borders. These companies list on the board for various reasons, one of them being to raise capital. But during a time such as this, has that been the case? The brilliant minds at the organization tasked to see that very motivation through are led by Chief Executive Officer Thapelo Tsheole. He joins us this evening as we assess the performance of the BSE during these turbulent times. Thapelo, we've seen what was considered a wild turn of events last year on the US stock market as a result of COVID-19. Perhaps right now you could talk us through the reaction of the Botswana Stock Exchange as a result of the same.
The reaction in terms of Botswana Stock Exchange mainly emanated from our preparedness in terms of any event of happening like coronavirus. Number one, the reaction in terms of daily doing of business. Our business was not interrupted because of the technology that we use. We're able to seamlessly work from home in terms of trading and settling. Also, we managed to impact some knowledge in terms of the companies to continue to execute our mandate in terms of being a platform to raise capital, because that is what a stock exchange is, provide a platform for companies to raise capital. A lot of companies managed to raise additional capital, which they so much needed in times of crisis. In terms of the activity, there was a big impact. Turnover levels in terms of equity went down by 61%, from about 1.8 billion to about 700 million pula. That's a big drop. Therefore, the turnover levels per day was about 1.8 million worth of shares trading every day, compared to 2019, which was about almost 8 million pula. But at all-time high in about 2016, we were trading about 12.5 million pula. So you can see the equity trading levels were actually much more impacted. But the interesting thing is that, you know, in terms of crisis, when the equity market is going down, the bond market normally go up. And therefore, that is why we are able to see an increase in terms of bond market from about 17 billion pula in 2019 to about 20.3 billion pula in 2020, by end of 2020. And also even in terms of trading levels, the turnover levels in the bond market, I think, increased tremendously, with government bonds trading about 2.1 billion and corporate bonds trading about 225 million pula. So the total turnover levels in terms of equity, bonds and exchange trade funds combined was about 3.6 billion pula in 2020, from a high of about 4.2 billion pula in 2019.
Economists all over the world have warned against lockdowns as they threaten efforts to resuscitate economies, right? While these and other economic policy implementation are geared towards flattening the curve of infection and the curve of recession, have the lockdowns that we were seeing mainly last year had an effect on the Botswana Stock Exchange?
Yeah, yes, because at the height of the lockdown in March 2020, the performance of the BSE was very good actually. We remained the only market in the world which was still positive when the first lockdown actually happened. But a lockdown is a lockdown. You lock everything. So you basically stop majority of the function of the economy. The BSE was able to resist or to become strong to a certain level that it can no longer resist the impact of the lockdown. And therefore, we saw the consequences of the lockdown in terms of the companies' performances that are listed on the stock market. And when the companies listed on the stock market start to get hit, we now ultimately filters at the market level. And therefore, it's very true. Lockdowns, by their nature, lock the economy. And when you lock the economy, it means production goes down. When production goes down, it means output will go down. When output goes down, it ultimately filters to economy and the general performance of the market.
Wang and his colleagues in a 2020 report wrote that, I quote, "A pandemic such as COVID-19, which could be described as a black swan event, could cause shock, fear, and panic amongst both domestic and international investors, and could result in a sharp selling response." Have we seen that happening here?
Yes. Naturally, in the ecosystem of the global financial market, it's such that foreign investors mainly want safety when there are crises. And therefore, Botswana and any other emerging market are likely to experience sell-offs in times of pandemic. Sell-offs because the foreigners will dump the stocks and they will run to developed market which they think are more secure. And that's exactly what happened in our market. We had a lot of sell-offs by foreign investors in our market, and also by foreign investors in terms of foreign institutional investors and foreign individual investors. They sold off their stocks, and luckily enough for us, we have got a strong institutional base in Botswana, which was able to absorb those stocks. But the other sell-off that actually happened was sell-off by retail investors in the country. Because in terms of crisis, I mean, people will ordinarily need cash, and therefore they will sell off their investments in order to access the cash that they needed. And therefore we experienced both the sell-off by foreign investors and also by the retail investors in Botswana. But that sell-off was able to be absorbed by the local institutional investors, which we have a strong base for in the BSE.
In Africa, help is what we do. That is why we at FNB are relentlessly driven to provide real help to you, the passionate and courageous, the creators and the optimists. These are the entrepreneurs we support, the communities we uplift. It is because of you that real help is what we do. FNB, how can we help you?
In 2020, on a column in the New York Stock Exchange, Paul Krugman was quoted as saying, "Whenever you consider the economic implications of the stock market, you need to remember three things. First, the stock market is not the economy. Second, the stock market is not the economy. Third, the stock market is not the economy." So the relationship between stock prices, largely driven by an oscillation between greed and fear and real economic growth, has always been loose or non-existent. Do you agree with his thoughts?
I think from basic economics, elementary economics, the stock market is regarded as a barometer, as a measure of economic performance. And therefore, this is mainly derived from the fact that the stock market is made up of companies that are operating in a respective economy. And therefore you have companies and then you have investors. And therefore the relationship between the economy and the stock market is positive in such a sense that, because companies are doing business in that economy. And therefore when the economy gets hit, it's mainly because those companies are not doing well. And that is why even in Botswana case, you realize that the projected GDP decline was about 8%. And even the stock market decline in last year was about the same percentage, about 7%. That is sort of a mirror image of what is actually happening at the GDP level, because companies operate in an economy, and the economy is a reflective of what the companies operate in that economy operate in. And therefore, I'll still contend that there's a relationship between the stock market and the economy in one or the other.
So in closing, Thapelo, what new insights on stock markets, considering their behavior during this time, can be drawn from this pandemic?
Yeah, I think the new insights are that, the things that we do at the BSE now, investment in technology is very critical. Right now, I think for the past 3 years, we have had heavy investment in technology, upgrading our clearing and settlement system, upgrading our automated trading system to enable technology-based type of investment. Because, in terms of the pandemic, we have realized that doing business is actually have gone digital. And therefore, if we could have not taken some prior measures to invest in technology, I think we're going to have experienced a lot of big troubles. And also, I think, the new way of working. You realize that, companies now need to drive performance in various ways. People are working from home. The companies need to be innovative enough to still improve their productivity and output and performance, even under that atmosphere. So I think these are some of the things that we're actually going to be experiencing going forward. For us, fortunately, I think we're only riding on the pandemic wave. But stock market globally have always been on the ride to improve technology and to be technology-based, which I think is going to be the new norm.
In Africa, help is what we do. That is why we at FNB are relentlessly driven to provide real help to you, the passionate and courageous, the creators and the optimists. These are the entrepreneurs we support, the communities we uplift. It is because of you that real help is what we do. FNB, how can we